Jake had been sneaking around his own house for 3 weeks now, and he was getting tired of it. Every morning, he would wait for his girlfriend Lisa to leave for work before rushing to the spare bedroom with his latest purchase, paint brushes. Here, canvas there, a fancy light that cost way too much money. He felt like a spy in his own home. The whole thing started when he noticed something that broke his heart a little. Lisa would stop at art stores when they went shopping together. She would touch the paint tubes gently, pick up brushes, and test them against her palm, then put everything back and walk away with this sad look in her eyes. When they watched movies at home, she would get excited during any scene with an artist painting. Her whole face would light up, and then she would catch herself and change the subject. One night, Jake found her old art supplies hidden in a box under their bed. There were dried-up paints, brushes with bent bristles, and sketchbooks filled with beautiful drawings. The last page had a date from 5 years ago. 5 whole years since she had touched any of this stuff. He asked her about it once, and she just shrugged and said she used to paint but wasn't good enough to continue. That's when Jake decided to do something about it. He started researching art supplies online during his lunch breaks at work. He watched YouTube videos about setting up art studios. He even called Lisa's mom secretly to ask what kind of painting Lisa used to love most. Watercolors, her mom told him, especially landscapes and flowers. The spare bedroom had been collecting junk for months. Old boxes, winter clothes, a broken exercise bike that neither of them wanted to throw away. Jake spent his first weekend clearing everything out. Lisa thought he was just cleaning, which was perfect. She even helped him carry some boxes to the garage, completely unaware that she was helping him prepare her surprise. Shopping for art supplies was harder than Jake expected. The art store was full of serious-looking people who seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Jake felt completely lost. There were so many different types of brushes, so many colors of paint. The lady at the store was helpful, though. When he explained what he was trying to do, her face softened and she spent an hour helping him pick out everything Lisa would need. The easel was the hardest part. Jake had never been particularly handy with tools, but he was determined to set everything up perfectly. He spent one entire Saturday following YouTube tutorials on how to position lighting for artists. He moved that lamp around the room at least 20 times, testing different angles. He wanted the light to be just right when Lisa sat down to paint. As the days went by, Jake found himself getting more and more excited about the project. He would come home from work and immediately go check on the room, adjusting things, adding new supplies he had ordered online. He bought a small refrigerator to keep in the corner so Lisa wouldn't have to leave the room when she got thirsty. He hung up inspirational quotes about creativity that he found on Pinterest. But the more Jake worked on the room, the harder it became to keep the secret. Lisa started asking questions. Why was he always disappearing into that room? What were all those packages being delivered? Why did their house smell like paint sometimes? Jake had never been good at lying, and he could see Lisa getting more curious each day. The worst part was when Lisa would try to peek into the room. Jake had to keep the door locked at all times, which felt weird in their own home. Sometimes he would catch her standing outside the door, listening to the sounds he was making inside. She would ask what he was doing, and he would give vague answers about organizing or fixing something. He could tell she didn't believe him, but she was being patient and respectful of his privacy. 3 weeks into the project, Jake decided to add one final touch. He set up a blank canvas on the main easel and tried to paint something himself. He had never painted anything in his life, but he wanted to create something personal for Lisa to find. When she first entered the room, he chose to paint the sunset. They had watched together on their first vacation, a simple beach scene that meant a lot to both of them. The painting was terrible. Jake knew it was terrible. The colors were all wrong, the perspective made no sense, and his brushstrokes looked like a child had done them. But there was something about the process that he enjoyed. For the first time, he understood why Lisa used to love this so much. There was something peaceful about mixing colors and trying to capture a memory on canvas. The night before Lisa's birthday, Jake put the final touches on the room. He arranged all the supplies neatly, positioned the lighting perfectly, and covered his amateur painting with a cloth. Everything was ready. Tomorrow morning, he would bring Lisa in here and show her what he had been working on for weeks. He imagined her surprise, her joy, maybe even some happy tears. But as Jake stood in the doorway looking at his creation, he felt nervous. What if Lisa didn't like it? What if she thought he was being pushy, trying to force her back into something she had deliberately left behind? What if his surprise made her feel bad about giving up art in the first place? All these doubts started creeping into his mind as he prepared to lock the door one final time. He could hear Lisa moving around in the kitchen, probably getting ready for bed. Tomorrow was her birthday, and Jake had never wanted anything to go right as much as he wanted this surprise to be perfect. He took one last look around the room, said a little prayer that everything would work out, and turned off the lights. The surprise was ready, whether he was ready or not. The morning of Lisa's birthday started perfectly. Jake woke up early and made her favorite breakfast, pancakes with fresh strawberries, and that expensive maple syrup she loved, but never bought for herself. He was buzzing with excitement, barely able to contain himself as Lisa ate and chatted about her plans for the day. She had no idea what was waiting for her just down the hallway after breakfast. Jake suggested they open her other presents first. He had bought her a nice necklace and some books she had mentioned wanting. Lisa seemed happy with everything, but Jake could barely focus on her reactions. His mind kept drifting to the spare bedroom and the surprise waiting behind that locked door. He kept checking his watch, counting down the minutes until he could finally show her what he had been working on. But then something unexpected happened. As Lisa was putting away her new necklace, she suddenly stopped and looked at Jake with a curious expression. She had been patient for weeks, but her curiosity was finally getting the better of her. "Jake, I need to ask you something," she said, sitting back down at the kitchen table. "What have you been doing in that spare room? And don't tell me you're just organizing because I can smell paint. And I heard you using tools in there. Plus, all those art supply packages that have been delivered. I saw the return addresses." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. This wasn't how he had planned the reveal. He wanted to control the moment, to build up the surprise properly, to see her face when everything was perfect. But Lisa was looking at him with that determined expression he knew so well. When she decided she wanted answers, she usually got them. "It's a surprise," Jake said weakly. "Trying to buy more time. Can't you just wait a little longer? I promise it's worth it." But Lisa was already standing up from the table. She had that look in her eyes that Jake recognized, the same look she got when she was trying to solve a puzzle or figure out a movie plot before the ending. She was done waiting. "I've been patient for 3 weeks," she said, walking toward the hallway. "I've watched you sneak around. I've pretended not to notice all the mysterious deliveries. I've even helped you carry boxes without asking what was in them. But it's my birthday, and I'm tired of being kept in the dark about something happening in my own house." Jake jumped up and hurried after her, his mind racing. The room wasn't quite ready for the reveal. He had planned to give a little speech first, to explain why he had done all this, to prepare her emotionally for what she was about to see. More importantly, his amateur painting was still sitting there uncovered, and he felt embarrassed about her seeing his terrible attempt at art. "Lisa, please," he called out as she reached the spare room door. "Just give me 5 more minutes. I need to set something up properly first." But Lisa had already grabbed the door handle. She paused for a moment, looking back at him with a mix of excitement and determination. "Jake, I love that you wanted to surprise me, but I can't wait anymore. I'm too curious, and honestly, all this secrecy is making me a little crazy." Jake watched in panic as she started to turn the handle. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. All his careful planning, all those weeks of preparation, all the time he had spent imagining her perfect reaction, it was all about to crumble because he couldn't control the moment anymore. "Don't peek," he said desperately, reaching out toward the door. "Seriously, Lisa, don't look yet. It's not ready. and I wanted to explain everything first for a split second. Lisa hesitated. Jake thought maybe she would listen to him. Maybe she would step back and give him those 5 minutes he needed to prepare everything properly. But then she did something that completely caught him off guard. Instead of stopping, instead of respecting his request to wait, Lisa looked him straight in the eyes and slowly pushed the door wider open. It wasn't defiant or disrespectful. It was more like she was saying, I trust you, and I'm ready for whatever's in there, even if it's not perfect. I'm opening it. She said softly but firmly, I can't wait anymore, Jake. Whatever you've been working on, whatever surprise you've prepared, I want to see it now. Imperfect or not, ready or not, I want to see what you've been putting so much love and effort into. Jake felt a mixture of panic and resignation wash over him. There was no stopping her now, and honestly, part of him was relieved. Keeping this secret had been exhausting, and maybe it was time for the truth to come out, even if it wasn't happening the way he had planned. As Lisa pushed the door fully open and stepped into the room, Jake held his breath. He couldn't see her face from where he was standing, but he could see her body language change. She had stopped moving completely, just standing there in the doorway, taking in everything he had created for her. The moment of truth had arrived, and there was no going back now. Jake stepped up behind her, ready to face whatever reaction was coming, hoping that his love and effort would be enough, even if the surprise wasn't as perfect as he had imagined it would be. Lisa stood frozen in the doorway, her hand still gripping the door handle. For what felt like forever, she didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even seem to breathe. Jake couldn't see her face from behind her, but he could see her shoulders trembling slightly. His heart was still racing, waiting for some kind of reaction, any reaction at all. The silence stretched on, and Jake started to panic. Maybe he had made a terrible mistake. Maybe Lisa didn't want to be reminded of her old passion for art. Maybe seeing all these supplies would make her feel guilty about giving up painting, or pressured to start again when she wasn't ready. He opened his mouth to start apologizing, but then he heard a small sound that made him freeze. Lisa was crying. Not the angry kind of crying, not the frustrated kind, but the soft, overwhelmed kind that happens when something touches your heart so deeply that tears are the only way your body knows how to respond. Jake watched as she slowly stepped into the room, her eyes moving from one corner to another, taking in every detail he had spent weeks planning. You did all this, she whispered, her voice shaky with emotion. For me, Jake stepped into the room, behind her, suddenly feeling shy and uncertain. In the bright morning light streaming through the window, everything looked different than it had the night before. The room looked smaller somehow, and he started noticing all the little imperfections. The easel wasn't perfectly centered. Some of the paint tubes weren't arranged as neatly as he had planned, and that awful painting he had attempted was still sitting there under its cloth cover. I know it's not professional or anything, Jake started to say, his words tumbling out nervously. I mean, I watched a bunch of YouTube videos about setting up art studios, but I've never actually done this before, and I wasn't sure what kind of brushes you like best. So I got several different types. The lady at the art store helped me, but she probably thought I was crazy buying all this stuff, when I clearly don't know anything about art. But Lisa wasn't listening to his nervous rambling. She had moved deeper into the room and was gently touching the brushes he had arranged. So carefully, she picked up a tube of watercolor paint, cerulean blue, her favorite color that he had remembered from seeing her old supplies. She opened it and squeezed a tiny bit onto her finger, then smiled through her tears. This is the good stuff, she said softly. Professional grade, Jake. This must have cost you so much money. Jake watched as she moved around the room like she was rediscovering a lost part of herself. She tested the height of the easel, checked the quality of the paper he had bought, examined the lighting setup he had spent so much time perfecting. With each discovery, her smile grew bigger, and Jake started to relax. Maybe he had messed this up after all. I noticed you always stopped at art stores, Jake explained, following her round the room, and I found your old supplies under the bed. I saw your drawings, Lisa. They were beautiful. I couldn't understand why you stopped." Lisa paused at that, her expression growing more serious. She sat down on the small stool Jake had placed in front of the easel, and for a moment, she looked like she belonged there. Like this was where she was always meant to be. "I stopped because my college professor told me I didn't have real talent," she said quietly. "He said I was technically adequate, but lacked the creative spark that real artists have." I believed him for so long that I convinced myself he was right. Jake felt a flash of anger toward this professor he had never met, but he pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for anger. This was the time for Lisa to reconnect with something she had lost. "That professor was wrong," Jake said simply. "I've seen your work. I've watched your face when you see art that moves you. You have more creative spark than anyone I know." Lisa stood up again and walked over to where Jake's covered painting was sitting on a side table. She had noticed it earlier, but hadn't said anything. Now she was looking at it with curiosity. "What's under here?" she asked, reaching toward the cloth. Jake felt his face turn red. "Oh, that's nothing. Just something I was messing around with. It's terrible, really. You don't want to see it." But Lisa was already lifting the corner of the cloth, and Jake was too embarrassed to stop her. When she pulled the cover away completely, revealing his amateur attempt at painting their sunset from their first vacation together, Jake wanted to disappear into the floor. The painting was even worse than he remembered. The proportions were all wrong, the colors looked muddy, and his brushstrokes were clumsy and uncertain. It looked like something a child might bring home from school, not something an adult should attempt. But Lisa didn't laugh. She didn't make any jokes about his lack of skill. Instead, she stared at the painting with an expression Jake couldn't read. She moved closer to it, studying the details he had tried so hard to get right. "This is our sunset," she said finally. "From the beach in California." "I know it's awful," Jake said quickly. "I just wanted to paint something personal for you to find in here. I thought maybe if you saw that I was brave enough to try something new, even badly, it might inspire you to be brave too." Lisa turned to look at him then, and Jake saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen in years. It was excitement, pure and simple. The kind of excitement that comes from rediscovering something you thought you had lost. "Forever, Jake," she said, picking up one of the brushes from the table. The sunset that night wasn't orange like this. It was more coral, with hints of pink and purple. And the waves weren't that dark blue. They were more turquoise where they caught the light. She moved toward his painting with the brush in her hand, and Jake realized she wasn't criticizing his work. She was seeing it as a starting point, a foundation that could be built upon and improved. She was already thinking like an artist again. Lisa approached Jake's painting with a confidence he hadn't seen in her for years. She held the brush like it was an old friend she was greeting after a long time apart. Jake watched nervously as she studied his amateur sunset, wondering if she was going to try to fix his mistakes or just point out everything he had done wrong. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the painting with her brush. Jake nodded, even though part of him was terrified. What if she made it worse? What if she ruined the one thing he had created with his own hands? But then he realized how silly that was. Lisa was the real artist here. If anyone could improve his clumsy attempt at capturing their special memory, it would be her. Lisa dipped the brush into some water and then into a small amount of coral-colored paint. With gentle, confident strokes, she began working on the sky area of Jake's painting. Jake held his breath as he watched her transform his muddy orange sunset into something that actually looked like the beautiful evening they had shared together. "See how the light hits the clouds differently here," Lisa explained as she worked, her voice taking on a teaching tone that Jake found incredibly attractive. "The sun creates these layers of color, not just one flat orange. There's pink here, purple there, and just a tiny bit of yellow where the light is strongest." As Lisa continued to paint, something magical started happening. Her movements became more fluid, more natural. It was like watching someone remember how to dance after years of sitting still. Her whole body seemed to relax as she fell back into the rhythm of creating art. "This feels so good," she murmured, more to herself than to Jake. "I forgot how peaceful this is." How everything else just disappears when you're focused on mixing the right color or getting a brushstroke just right. Jake found himself mesmerized by watching her work. He had always known Lisa was talented, but seeing her in action was something else entirely. She made it look so easy, so natural. Every stroke of the brush seemed to know exactly where it belonged on the canvas. "Can you teach me?" Jake asked suddenly, surprising himself with the question. Lisa looked up from the painting, a streak of coral paint on her cheek. "Teach you what?" "How to do that," Jake said, gesturing toward the canvas. "How to make colors look like they're actually glowing. How to make a flat surface look like it has depth and movement. I want to learn." Lisa's face lit up with an expression Jake had never seen before. It was pure joy mixed with excitement and maybe a little bit of pride. "You really want to learn, even though it's messy and frustrating and takes forever to get good at?" "I want to learn because you love it," Jake said honestly, "and because watching you paint is like watching you come alive again. I want to be part of that." So Lisa began teaching him. She showed him how to hold the brush properly, how to load it with just the right amount of paint, how to make smooth strokes versus textured ones. Jake was terrible at first, his lines shaky and his colors muddy. But Lisa was patient in a way that surprised both of them. "Don't worry about making it perfect," she said when Jake got frustrated with a particularly wonky wave he was trying to paint. "Art isn't about perfection. It's about capturing a feeling, a moment, an emotion. Your painting already does that because it comes from love." They worked together for hours, completely losing track of time. Lisa would paint for a while, then guide Jake's hand as he added his own touches. Slowly, the amateur painting began to transform into something beautiful and meaningful. It wasn't museum-quality art, but it was theirs. As the afternoon wore on, Jake noticed changes in Lisa that went beyond just her painting skills returning. She stood straighter, spoke with more confidence, laughed more easily. It was like she was remembering who she used to be before that cruel professor had made her doubt herself. "I can't believe I let one person's opinion stop me from doing this for 5 years," Lisa said during a break, washing paint from her hands in the small sink Jake had installed in the corner. 5 whole years of not creating anything, all because I was afraid of not being good enough." Jake looked at their collaborative painting, which now showed a sunset that actually looked like the one they had watched together. The colors were rich and layered. The water reflected the sky convincingly, and somehow the whole thing captured not just what they had seen, but what they had felt that evening. "Maybe you needed those 5 years," Jake suggested. "Maybe you needed to live more life, have more experiences, before you could paint with this kind of depth and emotion." Lisa considered this, tilting her head as she studied their work. "You might be right. This painting feels different from anything I created in college. It feels more honest somehow, more real." As the sun began to set outside their window, casting real golden light across their art studio, Lisa made a decision that would change everything. She walked over to a fresh canvas and set it up on the main easel. "I want to start something new," she announced. "Something that's completely mine, from the very first brushstroke to the last. Will you sit here and keep me company while I paint?" Jake settled into a chair in the corner, perfectly happy to watch Lisa rediscover her passion as she began sketching the outline of her new creation. He realized that his surprise had become something even better than he had planned. Instead of just giving Lisa back her art, he had given them both a new way to connect and create together. 6 months later, the spare bedroom had completely transformed into the heart of their home. What started as Jake's secret project had become their favorite place to spend time together. The room was alive with color and creativity, filled with Lisa's completed paintings and Jake's woodworking projects that he had started. After discovering his own love for creating things with his hands, Lisa had painted almost every day since her birthday. Some days she would spend hours working on detailed landscapes. Other days she would quickly sketch flowers or birds she saw outside their window. The walls were covered with her work, showing her journey from those first nervous brushstrokes back to the confident artist she had always been meant to be. Jake had found his own creative outlet too. While Lisa painted, he began learning woodworking, creating custom frames for her art and building shelves to hold their growing collection of supplies. He discovered that working with his hands gave him the same peaceful feeling that painting gave Lisa. They would often work side by side in comfortable silence, each focused on their own projects but sharing the same creative energy. The door to the studio was never closed anymore. They had removed the lock entirely, making it clear that this space belonged to both of them and to anyone who wanted to visit. Friends would often find them there in the evenings, and many had been inspired to try their own creative projects after seeing how happy art made Lisa and Jake. But the biggest change wasn't in the room itself or even in their new hobbies. The biggest change was in Lisa's confidence. She had started an Instagram account to share her paintings, and people from all over the world were commenting on her work, asking to buy pieces, and sharing their own stories about rediscovering lost passions. The cruel words of that college professor seemed like a distant memory now. 3 weeks ago, something incredible had happened. A local gallery owner had seen Lisa's work online and asked if she would be interested in having her own show. Lisa had said yes without hesitation, and now they were just days away from the opening night. The gallery show was called Wide Open, a title that Lisa had chosen to represent not just the open door that had started everything, but the open heart she now brought to her art. The centerpiece of the show was the painting she and Jake had worked on together that first day, their collaborative sunset, that told the story of how love could bring someone back to their true self. As they hung the final paintings in the gallery space, Lisa reflected on how different her life had become. 6 months ago, she had been someone who avoided art stores and changed the subject when anyone mentioned creativity. Now she was preparing for her first solo exhibition, surrounded by dozens of pieces that represented her journey back to herself. Are you nervous about tomorrow night? Jake asked, adjusting the lighting on one of her landscape paintings. Lisa considered the question seriously. A few months ago, the idea of strangers looking at and judging her work would have terrified her. But now she felt ready, a little nervous, but mostly excited. She said, "These paintings are honest. They show who I really am, not who I think I should be. If people don't like them, that's okay. At least I'm being true to myself." The gallery opening was more successful than either of them had imagined. People filled the space, admiring Lisa's work and asking about her story. Several paintings sold that first night. But more importantly, Lisa connected with other artists and art lovers who understood her journey. The highlight of the evening came when an elderly woman approached Lisa with tears in her eyes. "I stopped painting 30 years ago when my husband told me it was a waste of time." The woman said, "Seeing your work and reading about your story has inspired me to start again. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to come back to something you love." As the evening wound down and they walked home together, Lisa took Jake's hand and squeezed it gently. "You know, I used to think that when you told me not to peek that day, I was being disobedient by opening the door anyway. But now I realize that sometimes the best discoveries happen when we stop following the rules and trust our instincts instead." Jake smiled, remembering his panic when Lisa had pushed that door open wider instead of waiting for his perfectly planned reveal. "I'm glad you didn't listen to me. If you had waited, it would have been my surprise for you. But because you opened the door yourself, it became our surprise, something we discovered together." They stopped walking and looked back at the gallery, where Lisa's paintings were still glowing under the professional lighting. In a few weeks, most of these pieces would go to new homes with people who had connected with Lisa's story of rediscovering her passion. But the real art, the transformation of two people who had learned to create and grow together, that would stay with them forever. "What do you want to paint next?" Jake asked as they continued their walk home. Lisa thought for a moment, then smiled. "I want to paint doors. Lots of different kinds of doors. Open doors, closed doors. Doors that are just slightly ajar. Doors that represent all the possibilities we haven't discovered yet. And I'll make frames for every single one." Jake promised. As they reached their house, they could see the warm light spilling out of their art studio window. The room where it all began was waiting for them, ready for whatever creative adventures tomorrow would bring. The door was wide open, just the way they liked it, letting inspiration flow in and out freely. Lisa had learned that sometimes the most beautiful surprises aren't the ones that are perfectly planned and revealed at just the right moment. Sometimes, the most beautiful surprises are the ones we discover when we're brave enough to open doors we're told to keep closed, when we trust our curiosity more than our fear, and when we're willing to step into the unknown with someone we love by our side.